Finally, a statement from a top US in safety board, the NTSB, warning American media against premature and speculative media reports that have pointed a finger of smear at Air India 171 captain Sumit Sabharwal. Alongside here in India, Major Pilot Association, Federation of Indian Pilots has sent legal notices to both the Wall Street Journal and the Reuters news agency, as well as to Captain Mohan Ranganathan, who first advocated the theory of suicide when it came to the Air India crash. I'm Barkha Dutt. You're with the Mojo Story. Our focus today is on whether two developments, the statement by America's NTSB and the decision by the Federation of Indian Pilots to take legal action against both the Wall Street Journal and the Reuters news agency, will stop the smear and the slander campaign without concrete evidence against Captain Sumit Sabharwal, the commander of the ill-fated Air India 171 that crashed a little over a month ago. The reports in the Wall Street Journal, clearly fed by American officials, have been challenged by India's investigation board as well, amid criticism of the preliminary investigation report that many believe was simply too open-ended and left room for far too much speculation. It has been horrific to see how Western media has spoken about Captain Sumit in the last few days. Some prominent anchors in the West have directly called him a suicidal murderer. I kid you not. It has personally made my blood boil as an Indian. Now, people seem to be finally reacting. As I mentioned, India's main investigation board looking into aircraft accidents has called out this speculative, unverified, and irresponsible reporting in Western media. And in the West, you now have America's NTSB also saying that they fully back the investigative process in India, that it will take time, and they find all the commentary that has emerged in the media thus far, in Western media in particular, against Captain Sabharwal premature and speculative. Will this put a rest to the matter, or will we continue to contend with selective leaks? Because remember, American investigators were given access to the probe report and are clearly the source of the leaks. Meanwhile, despite a short statement from our investigative authorities, we have remained officially silent. The report is extremely ambiguously worded, leaving speculation wide open as to what happened. Pilots that I've spoken to are saying we need to know critical timestamps of events that are mentioned in the preliminary report, timestamps that are missing. Let me introduce our guests on the program today. We have a very distinguished panel of experts. Wing Commander Sharad Panikkar is with us. He has flown and commanded a Dreamliner for 10 years. Good to see you, sir. Also joining us is Captain Ehsan Khalid. Good to see you, an aviation consultant who first made the point that the report should have either been fully confidential or fully open. The halfway house doesn't work. And also joining us is very distinguished retired Air Force officer, Air Marshal Dr. Sanjeev Kapoor. Good to see you on the program, sir, and really hoping to learn from all three of you today. Air Marshal Kapoor, I'd like to start actually with you. You know, so much speculation. A lot of pilots believe the engines failed first and then the pilots reached for the fuel cutoff switch. Others believe that the nature of the fire suggests a lithium battery explosion. Still others are talking about an electric failure. It's also important to correlate all of this in the context of advisories. A 2018 advisory from the FAA on fuel on locking mechanisms for the fuel switches. A 2020 advisory from General Electric talking about a microprocessor problem. A 2025 UK safety directive talking about a problem with fuel valves, a renewed directive from 2015, and most recently a 16th June directive from the FAA on how leaky faucets could in fact impact the electrical hardware on the plane. Given all of this, are you disappointed with how quick international media has been to blame Captain Sumit Sabharwal instead of looking at the aircraft itself?
Absolutely correct, Barkha, and you have summed it up nicely. In my appreciation, there's a pattern to all the Boeing accidents. I did a little bit of research once I started writing and tweeting and writing articles. The history goes back, for your viewers, from 1997, which I could lay hands on. In Indonesia, there was a Silk Air crash of Boeing 737. In 1999, one Egypt Air aircraft crashed in Boeing 767 in 99. In our recent memories, MH370, which went missing after getting airborne from Kuala Lumpur for Beijing over the seas, which has not been found till now. It was again a Boeing 777, in which the narrative, if you recall, was taken by the media that the pilot was depressed, pilot had issues, the pilot, intentionally flew that aircraft overseas and crash landed it. Till date, there is no news. Fast forward to 2018, Lion Air crashes 737 MAX, and then in 2019, Ethiopian Air's crash 737 MAX. Again, this is the aircrafts are too tech, the pilots are not good enough, the pilots have issues in coping up. Then they say they had mental stress, and now come to Air India 171, again 787. So all the global south countries, or as to say the developing countries, whenever there is a Boeing crash, it all invariably the narrative starts moving towards the pilot angle. That's my analysis one. Number two, the 2019 accident, it fortunately was on ground. A
In
787
Nippon, in Osaka,
yes, it got cut off once the pilot operated the thrust reversals, but that also did not find much mention. The whole problem, in my opinion, Barkha, is that this report, the prelim report, has been not done properly at all. The flight has just got airborne for 32 seconds. If you have CVR data, how much of 32 seconds of information, why can't you put it, the CVR?
yeah,
There's a
yeah.
camera in the cockpit. Why there is no mention about the camera? Another issue which I was reading is that internationally and globally,
Is there a camera in the cockpit? I thought there are no cameras in the. I think there are no cameras in the
am not
cockpit,
sure
sir.
he is shown, but I was
Yeah, yeah,
reading somewhere
no.
there
I
is a
think there's a
provision.
debate. There is a
Yes.
debate over bringing in cameras into the cockpits, but the cameras don't exist, sir, the best of my knowledge.
So I'm not aware. I was just reading yesterday
Okay,
that there is
okay.
a provision or there are cameras in 787.
Yeah.
I'm not aware. Next issue, which again I was reading, is that all international flights over 8 hours globally carry 3 pilots. It is only in our country that we have done away with this. So the DGCA or the regulatory bodies, that again what that article was saying, that it is not that the third pilot in any way would have averted this accident, but an extra set of eyes during the critical phase is helpful. So these are a few inputs from my side.
Let's open this up and bring in Wing Commander Sharad Panikkar. Unfortunately, what's happening is that despite the decision of the Federation of Indian Pilots to send legal notices to Wall Street Journal, to Reuters, you have now people regurgitating these in different parts of the world. So you have an Italian a sort of bulletin now writing about the Wall Street Journal, making a new allegation that actually Captain Clive, who was flying the plane, repeated his question, why did you cut off more than once? I don't know where this information from. It is not attributed. It is not sourced. Are you concerned about where these leaks are coming from? Why they're coming? Why we are not getting full information? Before we come to, what could have caused the crash, the way the narratives are playing out, Captain Sumit Sabharwal has been called everything from suicidal to murderous. It's just horrible to watch. It really makes my blood boil.
Okay. Prior to answering the first question, just a few clarifications on what Sanjeeva just mentioned. First is that there is no camera in the cockpit. There are no cameras in commercial cockpits anywhere in the world. There's been a debate over it. It's been debated, the pros and the cons and everything else. And as of date, there are no cameras in the cockpit. Number two, the car or the civil aviation requirements determines the number of pilots in the cockpit. Generally, if the flying time, and it's by a very straightforward car, okay, it's the flight duty time limitations that govern the car. And all airlines all across India, we come under the Indian cars. Similarly, the domestic laws and domestic rules of each country as determined would determine what are their flight duty time limitations. As a thumb rule, generally, wherever you have flying time of more than 10 hours, we require an extra pilot. And wherever you require a flying time of more than 12 hours, we require 2 pilots, as a thumb rule. So Air India in general, if the flying time is more than 10 hours, let's say you're going to London and the routing is, when the closure of Pakistan airspace, closure of the Iranian airspace, we had to take diversionary routes. That increase the flying time. Let's say from Delhi, you have to fly down south towards Ahmedabad. Somewhere around Ahmedabad, you turn right, you go through Muscat airspace, then you go through, all those different places. This increases the flying time. So then we had 3 pilots in several of the stages. But wherever the flying time was lesser, the number of pilots was as per the car.
Yeah.
So now, if we have, let's say, all our transcontinental flights which go to the US, invariably have 4 pilots. All the flights that go to Australia, which are around 12 or marginally more than 12 hours, we have 4 pilots. So there are two
Okay.
sets of. So
Okay.
Sanjeev is right in that an extra set of eyes would have always helped. But just for
Yeah.
information, it's not 8 hours, it's 10 hours. Coming now
Okay.
to your specific question. I would say the preliminary report which the AAIB put out lent itself to a huge degree of ambiguity. Both the language that is used, the structure of the English that they've chosen to use, the quality of information that they've put, the sequence of things in which they have put this whole thing together, it's lent itself to a great deal of ambiguity.
Yeah.
This is a major air crash. So we can rest assured that the attention of the whole world is focused upon India, and specifically this preliminary report. This is the first crash of the Boeing 787 in something like 14, 15 years of flying. This aircraft has flown more than about 4 million hours. 1,200 of the Dreamliners are still flying all over the world. Allow me to digress for a second. The day this crash happened on the 12th, I was sitting in Vienna. We just flown from Delhi to Vienna, and I was supposed to fly on that particular day from Vienna to Washington to operate Washington Delhi. My aircraft, which came from Delhi, had to come back because of the closure of the Iranian airspace that day. So when we heard the news of this crash, the first thinking was disbelief. How can two engines fail simultaneously? And that too on a takeoff, within 3 seconds of the takeoff. Such an eventuality is not even considered by the manufacturer, simply because it makes no sense. If you're getting airborne and both your engines fail, what can you do? If there is a 15,000-foot runway ahead of you, which is not the case today, you could have thought of trying to put it down. But if there is nothing ahead of you, what can you do? Like I mentioned earlier, this is more akin to a kill box. There is no escape in this, simply because there is not enough time to restart the engines.
Can I ask you something which I think hasn't been said but has been spoken about? I think if they had 10 more seconds, even 10 more seconds, because we know from the report that one of the engines had shown progress in relighting. The second engine was giving problems in not being able to contain deceleration. But do you think even 10 to 20 more seconds would have made all the difference between life and death, Wing Command?
It is possible. But you see, like when you look at an aero engine, let's say it is at 100% power. I'm just giving you a scenario. It may not always be true. Suppose I were to cut off an engine which is running at full power. I put the fuel control switch from run to cut off. The engine will wind down at a certain rate, 90, 80, 70, 60, etc., etc., etc. When it drops below flight idle, in this case, since the aircraft was in the air, technically, we will have an engine fail situation. All the warnings will come up. The ACAS warning will also come up. Now, let's say as the engine is cut off and she just started dropping. Mind you, I've just put the fuel control switch off. If I were to put it back immediately on, there is a chance that the FADEC will take over and will try to restart the engine, but from a higher RPM. Therefore, the relight time would have been that much lesser. Let's take another case in which I have cut off the fuel control switch and the RPM has been allowed to wind down below the flight idle. Below the flight idle, now engine is failed because she cannot sustain, and she continues below and she comes to what is just windmilling RPM. Let's imagine that the windmilling RPM is around 20%. Now, if I were to try to start the engine from 20% RPM, again, the process is going to take longer. The flight relight envelope gives us a better picture, but generally, the time that you start depends upon where you've got that RPM. If it has already come to flight idle, it's going to strike longer. The book figures that tell us in the case of engine relight say that relight times up to 2 minutes are required. But this caters for, or the figures that are given out here are those of a relight at altitude. Let's say you're at 35,000 feet.
Correct.
And one fail and you're trying to restart an engine. Do remember that the air is much rarer at that altitude. It takes a greater number of time. So it is very, very difficult to say exactly how much. But as a thumb rule, if you were to catch it earlier, the relight time would take
Okay.
less. But if it were to drop more, it would take more. So it's
So-
impossible to say with any degree of certainty unless you try it out in a simulator, for example.
Yeah.
Right? If I cut it off at this stage, what would happen
Yeah,
if I were to
sure.
cover this?
Sure, but so to get Captain Khalid in now, at this point, the heart of the debate seems to be the fuel control switches, right? And that's where the whole world's eye is, and people are going into simulators and testing. Can you actually take the control switches and take them from run to cutoff mode in 1 second of each other? I think Wing Commander Panikkar has earlier said he believes it's not possible. What is your take on that? Because we know from the report, ambiguous as it is, that 3 seconds into the flight, or 3 seconds after takeoff, not 3 seconds into the flight, 3 seconds after takeoff is when these switches go from run to cutoff, and 10 seconds later is when they come back on to run mode again. The pilots clearly bring them back. Do you believe that within 1 second, as is being hinted at but alleged by papers like the Wall Street Journal, this is even possible?
Okay, let's look at the heart of the problem that we are seeing here. And that is a CBR paraphrased sentence. Why did you switch off? Why did you cut
Yeah.
off the engine? Right?
Yeah.
And that is from where everything starts to come, that the switch was moved and somehow the other pilots saw it. But it is self-contradictory. Why? Because the pilot it is nobody's case that both the pilots were trying to switch off the engine, or
Yeah.
both the pilots were murderers. So one pilot wasn't. We don't know which one. The one who moved, the other one saw. Now the question comes in, why it is self-contradictory? The person who saw it, why did he wait for 10 seconds? Right? Because the fuel transitioned in 500 millisecond, one,
Yeah.
and then 500 millisecond the other. Right? Very fast move. It was done. Fine. But the person who was watching it saw it and says, why
Yeah.
did you cut off?
Yeah.
And he waited for 10 seconds to reverse this problem. Self-contradictory. Now, let us assume that the pilot were probably fighting and the other one wasn't allowing. CBR would say so. Right? Now we come to the other timestamp, which is at, I was with Panikkar yesterday and we have been talking. How much time will it take to move that spring-loaded switch from run to cutoff, and the other one also run to cutoff? If you were to pick up your pen or anything, just pick up and drop and pick up and drop and pick up and drop.
Yeah.
You would take not so much, just about an inch up and down. And you time out for 20 seconds, you will not go beyond 20. That means you can do this action of gripping and leaving 1 second per switch. Right? In this case, well, the guy was very fast and he pulled it off like, the fastest finger test. And he switched it off within 1 second. Right? But now let's go to the other timestamp that we have, 52
Yeah.
to 56. Right? Now, everybody knows that everybody in the cockpit knew that it is a dire state and we are going to die. This is
Yeah.
the time that anyone will be able to move this switch within 1 second. That
That's
means
right.
52 and 53 seconds from cutoff, it should have gone to run.
That's right.
But what is the time frame that it says transitions from in 52 to 56 seconds? So to run to cutoff happens in half a second, whereas cutoff to run, the switch positioning is being done in 4 seconds.
So
Now,
you are
Let me
Sir.
complete, because
Okay.
I thought
Okay.
over it the whole
Okay.
night, and I
Okay.
hope like hell that they don't change
Yeah.
the timestamp now.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
now, if the electrical switch, which I have been saying, was in the run position and both the engines shut down, they would be shown in the CAS message as fuel shut off. Right? So fuel shut off, when you see, the natural question is, why did you do it? He says, I didn't do it. Then they look at now they look at the switch, and now from run to cut off. They move and then cut off to run. In parlance, it is not a very easy thing to do, to move the switch from run to cut off at that, 100, 200 feet from the ground. It is not something that you would be willing to do. But from cut off to run, you can do it in milliseconds, right? So now if 1 second each, if you were to look at, then it took 4 seconds to cycle it through. So now everybody knows that the engine has failed. They are trying to save their time and they are super slow. Now you try to pick up the same stuff and wait for 2 seconds and then pick up. Not, we have to wait for 3 seconds. Yeah, put it down and wait for 3 seconds and then again pick it up. This is the 2 switches that you have done. Would you be able to explain this? You would be able to explain this because this relight action is being done manually. The person is doing it. The first one was done by auto. Now, why it would not be recorded in the DFDR is that if the switch position was already to zero, electrical zero, the first action of the pilot moving from run to zero will not be recorded because it was already there. And thereafter, you move it to run. What happens when you move it to run? It sends out quite a few signals to various one. And I wouldn't be surprised if EEC channel also changes from A to B when you move it for the second time. Okay, that would be aircraft specific.
Okay, I have questions. Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt your flow, but just so that I'm understanding you correctly.
Yes.
You are saying that you do not believe that it could take 10 seconds in a cockpit where everybody knows that they're going to die to turn the switches back on. Very simply, that action.
Not die. The guy who wants to live has seen somebody moving it down.
Correct.
He won't take 10 seconds to put it out.
Correct. But the missing information is we don't know at which point. Achha, we know that at 3 seconds he notices it. So you are asking why does it take 10 seconds more?
No. It is very clear by the words that has been paraphrased.
Yeah.
Why did you switch off? That means the person saw him doing. So that has to be at 42. So at 42, when the switch was moved, was seen by the other person, and that other person for some reason tried to take deep breath for 10 seconds.
And I think what you're saying is that the quoted part of the CVR for you is contradictory, because why would it take 10 seconds for the pilot who asks, why did you cut off? Who has seen it, the other pilot denies it. Why would it take 10 seconds for him to bring the switches back to run? Correct?
No, not just 10 seconds. Thereafter, 4 seconds. 52 to 56. It is at the 56th second that the second switch has been put to transition to on. So in total, there has been 14 seconds lost. Okay.
Yeah.
So it is while I am the one who is saying that if you move both the switches from run to cut off and then cut off to run, then you go to the other one, you put run to cut off and cut off to run, this will take 4 seconds, 52 to 56 seconds. This 4 seconds further proves that the switch was not at cutoff. If it was at cutoff, then it would be just 2 switch movements and it would take 2 seconds, not 4 seconds.
Understood. It's very interesting. Therefore, what follows from that the numbers don't add up for you in the report.
Okay. So it follows that the electrical switches malfunctioned. It was at the same position and engine cut off. At 42. At 52, it actually was recycled. And it took 4 seconds for them to do it. It is further collaborated that they said that I didn't do it. So the timing that is there, and for 2 switches to be moved to on or run to off and off to run, or run to off and off to run in a panic scenario, they have taken 4 seconds. If it was at the off, then they would have taken 2 seconds. This is first you can take this to other panelists, and then I will come up with the second revelation.
Okay, this is a very interesting revelation. The contradictions in the preliminary report, the timestamps not actually adding up. If indeed one pilot had manually moved the switches from run to cut off? How was there such a big gap? How could there possibly have been such a big gap? 14 seconds lost for the second switch to come back into run mode. Reactions, Air Marshal, Wing Commander, what, I'm sure you were following this argument closely. Air Marshal, I'll start with you. Can't hear Air Marshal. Can we unmute him? Sir, are you muted at your side? Please unmute it.
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
My take on the whole thing is that the actions of 787, quick reaction handout, I happen to get one. The twin engine failure emergency is generally when the aircraft is flying over volcanic ash. So the manufacturers have anticipated that both your engines may fail at a situation that by chance the pilots, or the aircraft flies through volcanic ash. And like the fellow panelists just covered, that it is extremely, extremely rare in a commercial aeroplane, that too of the size and order weight of a 787, that immediately at unstick, the pilot has to give a mayday call. So my first appreciation of the whole thing is something grave has happened which the crew were not aware. It has just taken them by surprise, and he is given a mayday call. The second action, as per the checklist, he is supposed to recycle the switches, what Ehsan has been just covering and what Wing Commander Panikkar has just covered. In my appreciation, the pilots have tried to recycle the switches to relight the engines. And as per the report, the left one partially started, the right one could not. And then third action is operation of RAT. So RAT, if it is operated by itself or it was the switch was pressed, I'm not aware. So this is, in my appreciation, having gone through the report, this may have happened, and which is more likely.
Okay, so let me bring in Wing Commander Panikkar also to react to Captain Khalid's points, which are very interesting, which is basically saying that if you were to sort of war game this out, it doesn't add up that the fuel switches, and again, please correct me if I'm saying anything wrong, that the fuel switches go from run to cut off at 3 seconds, but it would not take another 10 seconds for one switch to come back on and another 14 for a second switch to come back on. Am I saying it correctly, Captain Khalid? You want to clarify anything before Wing Commander responds?
The switches were moved from the fuel switch transitioned from on to cut off within 1 second interval. So I am just giving it 5.
But 3 seconds after takeoff.
Yeah, by 3 seconds after takeoff. And the person has seen him doing it. Then he is waiting for 10 seconds to come to 52 to put it to run. But even there, he is pretty lazy about it and is doing it in 4 seconds.
Understood. Wing Commander Panikkar, do you want to come in here?
Yes, I will just give me a few minutes because I have got to address a couple of things. The first point, when you look at the conversation per se, it could be interpreted, like I had mentioned earlier on your channel and several other channels before, it could be interpreted in another way. Now, let's say I am the person who's giving that question off. Now, I'm not sure, because since it's a paraphrase, it's not the exact words that have been used. Suppose I am asking you, did you do something? That means that I have not done it. I'm asking you. And you say, I've not done it. So where does that leave us? Neither of us have done it.
Yeah.
But the aircraft has lost both its engines, right?
Yeah.
Let's look at the second point. The use of terminology. This word transitioned is very rarely used in pilot parlance. However, it's a technical term and it's generally used in Western technology, Western media, transition. We just say it's been put on, put to run, put to cut, etc., etc. Okay. Look at the timing. Physically, now it's been more or less established that it takes a minimum of 2.5 seconds if you do at max speed. Visualize what is happening in the cockpit. You're focusing on the takeoff. You've got a head-up display in front of you. You're looking through that at the environment outside. The pilot is flying. He's rotating the aircraft towards 15 degrees of pitch. And he's also got his attention outside. Theoretically, if I have to do something inside the cockpit, I move from far accommodation because my eyes are focused outside to near accommodation. My eyes have to be focused onto something inside the cockpit. Identify the switch, pick it up off its spring load, move it to cut off, release it, and do the same to the other switch. This entire process can never take place in a period of less than a second. Physically, when people have tried it out in simulators, the fastest that anybody could do was about 2.5 seconds. 1 second is not possible.
Okay.
Second point, an electrical signal, multiple electrical signals, you can have 10 electrical signals in 1 second. So this indication of an engine failure is more indicative of an electrical stroke electronic signal. The FADEC cuts off the engines automatically under two conditions. One is on the ground, which is the TCMA, which has been talked about, the thrust control malfunction accommodation, supposed to be on the ground. Mind you, when you say on the ground is also a signal. The system has to tell the FADEC that the aircraft is on the ground. When the aircraft gets airborne, after a certain period of time, the system has to tell the FADEC that the aircraft is airborne. This is the air stroke ground position. Okay. So the signal which has come is more indicative of something that the FADEC has done. Something that it's an electrical signal. Because two things moving on, 1 second, just one more thing. Two things moving on to cut off. Physically, I can't do it. Physically, I don't think any pilot can do it. It takes a certain period of time, which is certainly more than 1 second. Whereas an electrical signal can cut it off. Second point, this indication of an engine failure, like I said, would come only at a certain point at which the RPM or the N1 or N2 has dropped below flight idle, and that takes time.
So I have a question on this. I have a question exactly related to engine failure. I'll start with you and then come to Captain Khalid and Air Marshal. A lot of people in our audience, aviation geeks, pilots, engineers, are now talking about, please ask, when was the RAT deployed? Now, we have a timestamp in the report itself for when the alternative power starts to come back. If you assume that the RAT was deployed, I don't know, 5 to 6 seconds before, we have so many people asking, saying, like, for example, Nitish says the RAT deployment at 080847 means it likely began at 080841-41, 2 to 3 seconds before the fuel switches were cut off. This hints at a system fault, right? There are many people making the argument that the timing of the RAT deployment is critical because the RAT will auto-deploy when the engines fail. Now, we have somewhat of a timestamp for when the alternative power comes back on or starts to come back on, but we do not have a precise timestamp for when the RAT deploys. And the big question would be, did the engines fail before the fuel switches transitioned? I'll start with you, Wing Commander Panikkar.
It's very valid. It's a valid question. There are 5 conditions under which the RAT auto-deploys. One of which is dual engine failure. And the second is low hydraulic pressures in all the hydraulic systems. We've got 3 hydraulic systems, the left, center, and the right, low pressures and all that. And there are, of course, a case in which loss of all the electric pumps and loss of displays, loss of all the 4 electric pumps and an engine failure, and one on approach and one on takeoff. What is relevant is, let's just take the case of the dual engine failure. For a signal for a dual engine failure to go automatically means that the engines have to come below the flight idle, and that takes time. If the RAT has deployed before that, there is an issue. And that issue is that something has told the RAT to deploy. What has told the RAT to deploy? It has to be one of these conditions. Did these conditions occur? Did you have a dual engine failure at the time at which the RAT deployed? Did you have low pressures in the hydraulic systems at the time at which the RAT deployed? See, normally, suppose I lose both my engines. I've got hydraulic systems. I've got 6 pumps of the hydraulic systems. I've got 2 mounted on one engine, one driven by the engine, and one electric. 2 in the center, both electric, and 2 on the right, one driven by the engine and one electric. And all these hydraulic pressures have to drop to get low hydraulic pressure in all the 3 systems. And that takes time. These are all 5,000 PSI systems. It takes time before anything now starts. It will not be like 5,001 and 0 in the next. So something has happened that has triggered the RAT.
Yeah. And
right?
but here's my question to you, Captain Khalid, and also to you, Air Marshal. If the rat has deployed a few seconds before, and if it has deployed before the fuel switches transition, for lack of a better word, then wouldn't the plane have? How did the plane lift off even? How did the plane take off? Captain
Okay.
Khalid? Yeah.
Yeah. So the thing is that the electrical failure being initiated first, leading to the RAT deployment, will have
Yes.
nothing to do with the aircraft power performance.
I
That
see.
means that means the electrical failure has started its sequence, and that catastrophic failure would trigger the generator loss of electric supply. RAT will come down.
Yeah.
That is how RAT would be available by 47th minute, a second, the time stamp. Number two, we also have a survivor who said that the lights flickered,
Yeah.
lights or multiple lights came in. That means for lights to come in, the lights must go out, and thereafter red and blue and green lights or whatever color he said, okay, had to come out. There was another statement from him that there was a sound. Okay, there was a loud sound that he heard. Okay, now remember, in all the conjecturing that we are doing or a speculation, whether the pilot tried to kill the switch or restart the switch, there would be no sound. The live person said he heard a loud sound. You know, if you are seated in the aircraft, in a jet aircraft, you do not hear the thunder that is
Yeah.
going out. You
Yeah.
don't, you can see very bright lights, but you cannot hear it out if it is from outside, unless there is a sound which comes in inside. So the lone survivor says very clearly that he heard a loud sound. Okay, so that would collaborate that there was something that was triggering the failure, and that triggered the failure further to give a wrong input to FedEx EEC fuels, which I don't care. Which part? I don't think anybody cares right now, as long as we understand that, nobody has explained the
So
sound, loud sound.
I think that's a great point. We've all forgotten the survivors account, but basically, what you're saying, Captain Khalid, is that you agree with Wing Commander Panikkar that an
Yes,
electrical failure takes place to start with. That triggers the rat, but it doesn't impact the takeoff. Yes, am I saying it correctly?
correct.
But after that, what happens to the fuel control switches is not clear in this
Yeah.
sequence.
So after that, what I'm saying is that the sequence of event has started occurring. It might impact the fuel flow, fuel shutoff valve, but it will not be so critical that it will go to zero now. It will take some time to go.
I
So
see.
engines are not like bulbs on and off. They run at 100%, they run at 98%, they run at 70%, they run at 75%. So there is a predetermined number at which engine failure signal will come on, and that would be the flight idle RPM. If the engine RPM goes
So,
below
so
that, then RAT should come on.
now, both of you are saying that you believe it's an electrical failure to start with. I think that's what I'm hearing from at least Wing Commander Panikkar and Captain Khalid. I know you have one more revelation. I don't know if it was linked to this, but I just want to bring in Air Marshal before I play out one clip on how you said it's a pattern to blame the pilots. How do you think the response should be met? You see, the Indian Federation of Indian Pilots is sending legal notices to Reuters, to Wall Street Journal, to Captain Mohan Ranganathan. But do you think the answer is to release the CVR completely, or do you think the answer is for the Indian authorities to do a press conference? What should happen next?
Absolutely. I've been saying on a lot of channels, I've written about it, I've tweeted about it. When MS-370 accident took place, the aviation minister, the head of the regulatory body, the chairman of Malaysian Airlines, all senior functionaries of the government were there in a room answering the questions of all the survivors, correction of the people, the relatives of all the people who have died, and also the press. And there is absolutely no statement from anybody in the civil aviation ministry after this accident.
Yeah.
The Indian aerospace industry is one of the fastest growing in the world, and with this kind of bossed up prelim report and
Yeah.
post accident handling, it doesn't give a very good impression to global aviators who wish to come and either invest here or take a flight in this country, because they find that the regulatory authorities are not coming up with the correct facts. Like I told you a little while ago, what is 32 seconds of conversation? From takeoff to crash, it is just 32 seconds. If the selective statement can be given, one, the preceding statement is also not given, the statement after that is also not given, in what context has it been spoken, not given, it leaves much more to speculation, in my opinion, rather than this
And
report. And 20 days, Barkha, 20 days. I have been handling accident investigation in Indian Air Force. I was Director General of Flight Safety and 20 days. The FDR and CVR data was with them. 20 days. And this kind of output after 20 days, in my opinion, it's not okay. It's not okay. And there is absolutely no professional in AIB team. There are hardly any pilots there. The stakeholders, that is the GE and Boeing people, are co-opted. Now, if those people are co-opted in accident, there's a saying in Africa, African proverb, which says, till the lion learns to ride, it will always be hunter's version. So till the developing countries start to manufacture their own aeroplanes and start having their own mechanisms to investigate and control the data, it will always be dependent on people who manufacture, and they would never ever allow you to come up with a narrative which does not suit them. And that's my take.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point about the composition of the body. Not enough experts in it. I believe not even a 787 trained pilot in it. That is what we know so far. No articulation from them. Finally, after public outrage.
There is no agency, Barkha, in our country which teaches aircraft accident investigation except Indian Air Force. And none of them come for this course with us. None of them. We kept writing to them. They are too busy. And when, God forbid, any unfortunate accident happens, they should co-opt people who are, professionals in doing accident investigation. But, hurriedly, they pick up somebody from various parties. The AIB team is headed by an engineer. So there is absolutely nothing to say against anybody. But what I'm saying is the points which have been brought out by the two fellow panelists, if they were, or people of similar people who have flown this platform, being a part of this investigation, more inputs would have been available to them to take.
I agree, because while we're all angry with international media and Americans for leaking, the preliminary report itself is so vague, vaguely worded, open-ended, incomplete, that it leaves all this room for speculation. Now, before I take final comments, and I think Marshall has spoken very strongly about a botched-up preliminary report, I want to replay, some of you may have seen this, what a top US attorney, the former IG of the US Department of Transportation, said about the Osaka incident, about the pattern of pilots being blamed, about how Boeing covers up after these crashes happen. Take a look. Elaborate on that. When you say that it is impossible at this moment to blame the pilots because it is such a highly computerized system and it is known to have had glitches in the past, can we actually start with the Japan incident that you mentioned with All Nippon, where basically the 787, both engines quit on landing? Talk a little bit about this. Take us through this incident and what it says to you.
Well, what that says to me on the All Nippon Airways, and fortunately, no one was hurt or no one was killed, but the plane has many systems, and this particular system was mandated by the United States Federal Aviation Administration, and it wanted the plane to have the ability, all by itself, pilots didn't have to do this, to sense whether it's in the air or on the ground. And the reason for that is if the plane was on the ground, they wanted the aircraft to be able to cut the thrust control, literally do cutoff. So the plane on the ground didn't have, runaway engines, run into other planes, run off the end of the runway, etc. So the plane itself will sense when it's in the air and when it's on the ground. And what happened in the ANA flight back in 2019 is the plane thought it was already on the ground and it was still in the air. And, for a pilot, you look out the window if unless you're in severe instrument flying conditions in the weather, but when you're in the air and when you're on the ground. But the aircraft was supposed to assist in that, and they had this system. They have this system where it will cut the engines if the plane itself thinks it's on the ground. Very important thing to examine. It's happened before, and until that is also examined along with a myriad other things, that's an issue for me. Sure. I mean, my first impression, again, it's based on my prior work. I mean, so many cases I've worked on where the knee-jerk reaction was to blame the pilots. And years later, it was proven the pilots didn't do this. It was the aircraft. And there were problems with the aircraft. So my initial impression of the preliminary report, and of course, they had to get this out. The international guidelines are you put a preliminary report out at 30 days. And there's warnings on it that says this is just a preliminary report. This doesn't prove anything. So my initial reaction is still the plane suspect until shown otherwise, because with a plane this advanced, the plane this highly computerized, until we do all these examinations and look at all the evidence, it is not only unfair, but it's simplistic and harmful to blame the pilots, because that cuts off reasonable investigation into other areas unless you say, no, we're not going to just blame the pilots, because many times I have seen this and many times we've been able to disprove that.
If you say the plane is suspect unless shown otherwise, would you at this point, and this has happened before, the 737s were grounded, Boeing had to go back to the drawing board. They had to fix the issue. I think if I'm not wrong, you have said elsewhere that even after the All Nippon case, Boeing was alerted and they did have to acknowledge design issues. At this point, would you be looking at saying the plane remains the key suspect, the plane is suspect, and therefore, would you be saying grounded till further notice? There are 1,200 of them worldwide.
Well, I probably would, but then I'm very cautious. I probably would put out a what's called a service bulletin or a warning to have everyone inspect the system and inspect it now. Now, you can do that. It depends how it's ordered. Sometimes it's an emergency order and you must do it immediately before any more flights. And sometimes they give them 30 days, 10 days, 6 months to do it. But I think those systems have to be checked worldwide. Sure.
Okay, I think some important points being made there, in particular about the Osaka incident, which does demonstrate that there can be an uncommanded sort of function that takes place on the plane, like happened on landing in Osaka. I think the comment of the day from our audience is from Prasad Duvuri. These last years have shown us that not only does Boeing manufacture planes, it also manufactures the stories of plane accidents. After 737, the pilot was blamed. It took a second crash for Boeing to accept that the fault was theirs. Quick last comments, Captain Khalid. You had another revelation. Yeah. Go for it.
Okay, so it seems that these are the times for paraphrasing of things. So I would paraphrase an FAA advisory directive. It is effective from October 23rd, 2024, and I would read out a paragraph from that.
Yeah, can you share the paragraph? Can you share the dates again?
The date is so if you can bring it out on this one. The page is paragraph echo. That is the one. This AD was prompted by incidents related to erroneous. The AD was prompted by incidents which are related to erroneous auto throttle behavior during a balk landing with auto throttle engaged. Potential erroneous readings from low range radio altimeter, possible deficiencies of low speed protection, and crew alerting system. The FAA is issuing this AD to address problems of thrust management and displays and crew alerting operational program software. Unsafe conditions, if not addressed, could result in possible runway overrun, that is while landing, and controlled flight into terrain. This word, that's why I said this is there are two pilots, they would know what controlled flight into terrain is. Okay, and that is what has happened. And this FAA is not talking to airlines, they're talking to Boeing.
Yeah.
Okay. And they are also talking to Boeing, not on anything else, but a software upgrade of thrust management function and flight management function, block 4 to block 4.1. Okay, so what has happened in this one, it's a pretty long one, but it is sufficient to say that this can also result in CFIT event. Okay, Boeing requested these deletions because auto throttle low airspeed enhancements were implemented in Block 4.0. Okay? And come up again. This is FAA issued a notice NPRM for all its model of aircraft of 787, and it is dated 24th November 2023, and it says that incidents related to erroneous auto throttle behavior, auto throttle erroneous reading from LLRA, that is a low altitude reading, possible deficiencies in low airspeed protection and crew alerting system, and they are doing it because of safety. There is a clear-cut statement. FAA proposed the required updating of thrust management and DCA, that is display and crew alerting operations. The FAA is issuing this AD to address the problems with TM and DCA ops, which could result in possible runway overrun or controlled flight into terrain. Okay. Now, what I'm saying is, we already know, and Boeing has accepted, that there is a problem with the aircraft on TCMA on ground. Now we see that they have accepted, and there is I salute to FAA despite our having disagreements with it, because there is someone who is trying to actually keep a tag on the software changes from Block 4 to Block 4.1. The thing is that this one dock landing means the aircraft is coming for landing and it goes round. And in this one, the throttles can misbehave. That is that low altitude system. Okay.
Yeah.
So now we know that TCMA, that would shut down the engine, happen on ground, but there is another problem with the software that is happening in the air. Okay. So do we know whether this will happen? Who is the technically qualified person in the AIB to give a clear-cut okay to the software upgrade of Block 4.0 or 4.1? Do we even have the software source code to even see as to what glitches can it produce? Okay. In today's time, it is not the engineer, it is not the pilot. We are suspecting the software. And let me tell you, no one in the AIB team would be able to run the software line by line. Therefore, how could you give a clean chit there? Okay. And this particular document has been given to me by by an engineer, and he says that this should actually be run through by a software expert, because and mind you, this directive has been issued because of incidents reported by Qatar Airways and American Airlines. That means Panikkar was flying. Panikkar, are you aware that your throttle system could be malfunctioning on the go round?
I am not aware of any directive.
Because
if something like this would come in the form of an airworthiness directive, that would have come to the engineers.
Right. So,
but I'm not aware of it.
Right. I'm not making up. This is there. I'm not paraphrasing. There is a directive that is saying there are problems with thrust management system. And that thrust management system problem is specifically, it has been shown to have occurred by multiple airlines and aircraft to issue this. And they are addressing it to Boeing. And Boeing is requesting in one of the document, Boeing is requesting FAA, please do not call it a malfunction, call it an erroneous response. They're trying to dilute from malfunction to erroneous. But then FAA, hats off to them, they haven't diluted the word CFIT. If you were to go back into flight safety classroom and learn about flight safety, this particular accident will be covered under CFIT accident. The aircraft was fully serviceable, and that is how it went into the ground. Okay, and the word has been used. How would this particular 2023-24 directive not find a mention in AIB?
Yeah. I think this is a big revelation. Wing Commander Panikkar, I have to close if you want a quick response to it, since you actually flew this plane.
Controlled flight into terrain, I think, while technically you might like to say that the aircraft was fully serviceable, but if it's not got its engines or the engines are process of restarting, I'm not sure if it falls within the ambit or falls within the true definition of controlled flight into terrain. Control flight into terrain is when the aircraft is fully serviceable. When the aircraft, the engines are developing thrust, but something has happened, some inputs have come from some system, maybe the radio altimeter, maybe the terrain, maybe some other erroneous indication, that has led to a fully serviceable aircraft going into the ground. CFIT, I'm not sure if this would get classified as that because technically the engines are not running, they were in the process of relight. That's number one. Number two, I am not aware of this conversation between Boeing and FAA and Boeing and Qatar or Boeing and any other American airlines. Because normally, if something that relates to safety or is related to a false landing, this should be made available to all the operators.
But you know, the point is that a lot of these directives are only coming out of the woodworks now, especially the advisories, but even the directives. And the point that raises for me, and I'm sorry I have to end there. I know it's a deeply technical subject. I don't know where Captain Khalid went, but thank you for flagging this. We'll certainly do some more homework on it, and I'm sure Vinkamana Panikar will also have a closer look on it. The larger point is this: there are enough documented safety concerns in the forms of advisories and directives. We had the Osaka incident. We've had other incidents. This is a highly electric plane. It is what Mary Schiavo called a flying computer. We need to be looking at the plane at least with a 50% open mind, as compared to simply pointing a finger at the pilot. And I think that's the bottom line. We leave it there. Captain Khalid, I said thank you for this revelation. We're going to do some more homework on it and have all of you back. But we'll say thank you for now. Vinkamana Panikar, Captain Ehsan Khalid, and Marshal Kapoor. Thank you. Several new revelations on this program. We'll be doing a deep dive into them and trying to get to the bottom of it on a day when the Federation of Indian Pilots is threatening legal action against the Wall Street Journal and Reuters. And America's NTSB is also slamming its own media this time for speculative and premature finger pointing at Captain Sumit Sabharwal, the commander of Air India 171. Thank you for watching. See you all soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.